Welcome to the world of science fiction, where extraordinary tales come to life. Enjoy the journey. The kid had her face buried in week-old potato peels when Nate found her. He'd stepped out of his greenhouse to dump the morning's coffee grounds and nearly tripped over the small, purple form hunched in his compost heap. Silver hair tangled with rotting lettuce, thin shoulders shaking with sobs that sounded wrong, too quiet like she'd learned crying too loud brought trouble. "Hey." Nate set down his bucket, keeping his voice soft. 20 years of combat zones had taught him to recognize true distress. "Kid, that's garbage. Literal garbage." She looked up, violet eyes huge in a gaunt face, tears cutting tracks through the dirt on purple cheeks. Maybe 8 years old, though alien kids were hard to gauge. She clutched a handful of decomposing vegetables like treasure and shoved them in her mouth, then immediately spat them out, wailing harder. "Shit!" The word escaped before Nate could stop it. He dropped to his knees beside her, hands hovering uselessly. In all his years as a soldier, he'd never felt this unprepared. Okay, let's get you some real food." The tackle came from his blind spot. 140 pounds of fury slammed into his ribs, sent him sprawling into the red dirt. His head cracked against the ground hard enough to see stars. "Get away from her!" Weight on his chest, fists pounding his shoulders, silver hair whipping across his face as his attacker screamed something in a language his translator couldn't parse fast enough. Nate grabbed the wrists, trying to claw at his face, used his opponent's momentum to roll them both. Military training kicked in before his brain caught up, pinned the arms, controlled the head, neutralized the... Another purple face stared up at him, older than the kid, maybe mid-20s, with the same silver hair but pulled back in a messy braid, same violet eyes but filled with rage instead of tears. "I said get away from... I was trying to help!" Nate released her wrists, rolled aside before she could hit him again. "Your kid was eating garbage." "She's not..." The woman scrambled to her feet, then saw the little girl curled in the compost, still crying. The fight drained from her instantly. "Know me? Oh, sweetie, no!" She rushed to the child, pulled her close. Switched to that melodic language again, rocking the girl against her chest. The kid, Nomi, buried her face in the woman's worn work coveralls and sobbed harder. Nate stayed where he'd landed, giving them space. His ribs ached from the tackle. Pretty good form for a civilian. The woman looked exhausted up close. Dark circles under those purple eyes, cheekbones too sharp, that particular hollow look that came from skipping meals so someone else could eat. "Human food makes us sick," she said finally, still holding Nomi. Her accent made the words musical despite the flat delivery. "She knows that. Her voice cracked. "She's so hungry she'll try anyway." Nate pushed himself to his feet, brushing red dust from his jeans. "Velkani?" She nodded without looking at him. "There's a Velkani market 6 blocks from here. They sell Threx." She lifted her head then, and the defeat in her eyes hit him like shrapnel. "1 mushroom costs what I make in 2 days. I work 3 jobs. It's not enough." "Can't you eat anything else?" Nate asked. "Supplements? Other proteins?" Sari's laugh was bitter. "Velkani evolved with Threx. It's not just food. It contains enzymes we need to process any nutrients at all. Without it, we can eat a mountain of other food and still starve. Our bodies literally can't digest anything else." She pulled up Nomi's sleeve, revealing purple skin stretched too thin over prominent bones. "See these white spots? That's the beginning of enzyme failure. A few more weeks without enough Threx and her organs start shutting down." "That's why she was eating garbage," Nate said, understanding. "She's desperate enough to try anything." "The hunger drives you crazy eventually. You'll eat rocks, dirt, anything to make the empty feeling stop, even though you know it won't work." Sari's voice was hollow. "I've been giving her most of my portions, but..." "Sari doesn't eat enough," Nomi interrupted in accented English. She pretends she's not hungry, but I hear her stomach at night. Nomi whimpered something in their language. The woman, her sister had to be, same bone structure underneath the exhaustion, smoothed the child's tangled hair. She says her stomach hurts, the woman translated unnecessarily. The kid's distended belly told that story clear enough. It always hurts. Nate had seen starvation before. Different planets, different species, same hollow eyes, same quiet acceptance that hurt worse than screaming. But those had been war zones, places where supply lines got cut and civilians paid the price. This was just Tuesday on Torin Ka. "Come inside," he heard himself say. The woman's arms tightened around Nomi. "We don't need charity." "Not offering any. Just get her out of the sun while we figure this out." She studied him, this purple woman with her starving sister and her stubborn pride. Nate recognized the look, calculating whether he was a threat, whether his help came with a price she couldn't pay. "The bunker's cooler," he added. "Got water that doesn't taste like rust." Nomi lifted her head at the word water, said something that didn't need translation. The hope in her voice was universal. Her sister stood, lifting the girl with effort that showed in the tremor of her arms. Nate didn't offer to help. Pride was sometimes all people had left. His greenhouse bunker squatted at the edge of the settlement like a forgotten thought. Military surplus from the colonial expansion, all function and no form. The walls were 2 feet of reinforced concrete that kept the interior 20 degrees cooler than outside. Hydroponic towers stretched to the ceiling, heavy with tomatoes and peppers and things that had no business growing on a mining planet. "You're the plant man," the woman said, recognizing it. "The one who grows earth food." "Nate Hawkins." He filled a cup with filtered water, handed it to Nomi. "And you are?" "Sorry." She watched her sister drink like it might be snatched away. "This is Nomi." The little girl finished the water in 3 gulps, held out the cup for more. Her stomach gurgled audibly. "Hi, Nomi." Nate refilled the cup. "How old are you?" She held up 4 fingers on each hand. 8? You're pretty tough for 8. Nomi tilted her head. "Tough?" "Strong," Sari translated. "I'm not strong." Nomi's voice was matter-of-fact. "Strong people don't cry in garbage." The words hit Nate in the chest. He turned away, busied himself with the filtration system. "Everybody cries sometimes, kid. Doesn't mean you're not strong." "Do you cry?" "Nomi," Sari warned. "Sometimes," Nate admitted, surprising himself. "When my tomatoes die. Takes months to grow them, and then—" He made an explosion gesture. That earned him a tiny smile. "That's silly." "Yeah, probably." Sari set Nomi on a workbench, checking her over with practiced hands. "The human's right. Strong people cry too, like when Papa—" She stopped, jaw tightening. "When Papa went to the stars," Nomi finished quietly. "And Mama followed him." A year ago, maybe less from the way grief still lived in their faces. Nate knew that particular shadow. "I'm sorry," he said. Sari's laugh had edges. "Everyone's sorry. Doesn't buy Threx." She was right. Sari was worth exactly nothing on Torin Ka. But maybe. Nate studied his greenhouse. 20 years of killing people had taught him about growing things in impossible places. Not vegetables, other things. Things that needed specific temperatures and pH levels and nutrients. Things that shouldn't exist but did because someone needed them to. "What does Threx need to grow?" Sari blinked at the topic change. "What?" "The mushroom. What are its growth requirements?" "Nobody grows Threx. The Combine controls the only deposits." "That's not what I asked." She frowned, absently braiding Nomi's hair as she thought. "Dark spaces. Specific humidity, around 80%. Temperature between 15 and 18 degrees Celsius. And—" She hesitated. "They grow on decomposed volcanic organic matter. Our dead, specifically. Which explained the monopoly. Hard to farm something that required corpses. But not necessarily, Nate said, mind already working. Organic matter is just carbon, nitrogen, minerals. The specific composition could be replicated. You're not a biochemist. No. He pulled out a sealed container from under his workbench, popped the lid. Inside, perfect white mushrooms sprouted from dark substrate. But I grew these. Sari leaned forward despite herself. Earth mushrooms? Death caps, amanita phalloids, deadly poisonous. He sealed the container again. Used to grow them for previous work. You were military. Not a question. She'd recognized it in how he moved, how he'd pinned her. Was. Now I grow tomatoes. He met her eyes. And maybe Threx if you help me figure out the specifics. Why would you do that? Good question. Nate looked at Nomi, who'd found a piece of wire and was bending it into shapes. Just a kid who deserved food in her belly. Simple as that. Because I can, he said. Because I spent 20 years destroying things. Maybe it's time I fix something. The Combine doesn't know I exist. I'm just some human growing vegetables in a bunker. Sari stood abruptly. I can work. Whatever you want. Velkhani law says if I work sufficient hours, I become bonded property until… Stop. The word came out sharper than intended. Nobody's owning anybody. Not happening. Then what do you want? Nate considered. Help in the greenhouse. Someone who knows Threx, knows what it should look like, smell like, and… He rubbed his neck. Teach me Velkhani. I sound like an idiot at the market pointing at things. That's all? That's all. Sari stared at him like he'd grown a second head. Humans don't help for free. This one does. Why? He thought about explaining, about the children he'd seen starve on Orthea Station because supply routes got cut, about the family on Aravale Prime who'd shared their last meal with his squad, about 20 years of following orders that led to more hungry kids and how he'd finally walked away. Instead, he said, because your sister's tough, and tough kids deserve a chance. Nomi looked up from her wire sculpture. I like him, Sari. He has sad eyes but good hands. Nomi. What? Mama said you can tell about people by their hands. She held up her wire creation. A flower, Nate realized. His hands grow things. Sari's expression softened as she looked at her sister. The wire flower. The hope trying to take root despite everything. Okay, she said quietly. We'll try. I'll need samples, Nate said, already making lists. Threx samples. Soil from where it grows naturally. And time. Maybe 2 weeks to work out the growing medium. Samples are expensive. I've got savings. Soldiers' pay he'd never spent. Hazard bonuses from missions he'd rather forget. Get what we need. Sari looked like she wanted to argue, pride warring with desperation on her face. It's not charity, Nate said before she could voice it. It's an investment. If this works, we help more than just Nomi. If it works. When, Nomi corrected, still focused on her wire. Sorry, he has grow lights and everything. Look how red his tomatoes are. They're supposed to be red, sweetie. I know that. I'm not stupid. She looked at Nate very seriously. Sari thinks I'm still a baby. I'm 8. Basically ancient, Nate agreed solemnly. Nomi beamed. Actual joy on that too thin face, and Nate felt something shift in his chest. Decision crystallizing into determination. We start tomorrow, he said to Sari. Dawn, before your first job. Bring whatever data you can find on Threx cultivation. Even old texts, mythology, anything. You really think you can do this? Grow something the Combine says is impossible? Nate walked to his death cap container, held it up to the light. Perfect deadly mushrooms thriving where they shouldn't exist. I've done impossible before, he said. Just never for a good reason. Sari stood to leave, lifting Nomi from the bench. The girl clutched her wire flower. "Can we come back tomorrow?" Nomi asked. "I want to see the tomatoes grow." "Tomatoes are slow, kid. Boring to watch." "That's okay. I'm patient." At the door, Sari paused. "That thing about bonded service. Most humans would have taken it. Free labor." "I'm not most humans." She studied him, those violet eyes seeing more than he'd shown. "No, you're not." After they left, Nate stood in his greenhouse surrounded by earth plants that shouldn't exist on Torin-Ka. His hands still had blood under them that no amount of soil would clean. But maybe, just maybe, he could grow something that mattered. His old squad would have laughed. Nate Hawkins, the ghost who could infiltrate any compound, kill any target, now playing farmer for alien refugees. But they'd never seen kids cry into garbage. Or maybe they had and found ways not to care. He pulled up his old biochemistry files on his tablet. He'd studied it originally to make poisons. Funny how the same knowledge that killed could also cultivate. 2 weeks, he'd said, to reverse engineer an alien fungus that grew on corpses and make it thrive in his greenhouse. He'd done harder things, but never for better reasons. Outside, Torin-Ka's red dust swirled against the bunker walls. Inside, surrounded by growing things and impossible plans, Nate Hawkins got to work. The Threx spores arrived hidden in a coffee tin because even alien mushrooms needed smuggling sometimes. 40 credits, Sari muttered, closing the tin with shaking hands. "That's 2 weeks of food money." "Investment," Nate corrected, already examining the pale purple growth through his magnifier. The fungus looked like crystallized smoke, delicate filaments that seemed to pulse in the light. "Besides, I told you I'd cover it." "I don't like owing people." "Good thing you don't owe me then." She'd been coming every dawn for a week now, arriving before her first shift at the recycling plant. Nomi tagged along, curled up in the corner with outdated school tablets Nate had repaired. The kid's homework consisted mainly of drawing pictures of his tomatoes with disturbingly accurate botanical detail. "Temperature needs to be lower," Sari said, reading from a water-stained manual she'd found. 15 degrees exactly. Deathcaps liked 16. Nate adjusted the cooling unit he'd salvaged from his old ship. "Close enough." "Close enough might kill it. Velkhani biology doesn't work on close enough." "Everything works on close enough if you're stubborn about it." She made that sound she did, part laugh, part exasperation. He'd been cataloging her sounds. The short huff meant he'd said something ridiculous but amusing. The longer sigh meant she was about to reorganize something. "Your tools are chaos," she announced, proving him right. "How do you find anything?" "I grab whichever one's closest." "That's insane. Look." She started arranging his wrenches by size, then changed her mind and sorted by color. Purple ones in front. They're lucky. Purple wrenches are lucky? Purple everything is lucky. It's the color of royalty on my world. Your world doesn't exist anymore. The words landed harder than he'd intended. Sari's hand stilled on the tools. "Sorry," Nate said. "That was true." She resumed sorting with unnecessary force. "Doesn't mean the luck went away, just needs redirecting." From her corner, Nomi looked up from her tablet. "Sari believes in luck because Papa did. He said we were lucky to escape before the fungal plague got worse." "Nomi." "What?" "It's true." The kid went back to her drawing. "Papa was wrong, though. We weren't lucky. We just delayed the starving part." The casual fatalism in her 8-year-old voice made Nate's chest tight. He focused on preparing the growth medium, decomposed protein structures mixed with minerals that should, theoretically, approximate Velkhani organic matter without requiring actual corpses. "Why only 2 lungs?" Nomi asked suddenly. "What?" "Humans. You have 2 lungs. We have 4. Seems like bad design. Evolution doesn't take requests, kid. You should grow more, like you grow tomatoes. I'll add it to my list. Sorry snorted, another sound for his catalog. That one meant she found something genuinely funny despite herself. They worked in companionable rhythm. Sorry reading instructions, Nate adjusting conditions, Nomi providing commentary nobody asked for. By noon, they had their first test batch inoculated. 6 days, Sorry said, sealing the growth chamber. If it works, it'll work. You're very confident for someone who's never grown alien fungus before. I'm confident about everything. It's annoying, I'm told. Who told you that? Everyone I've ever met. She laughed, full and real this time. The sound transformed her face, revealing the woman under all that exhaustion and worry. Pretty, he realized. Not just alien interesting, but actually beautiful when she wasn't carrying the world on her shoulders. What? She asked, catching him staring. Nothing, just, you should laugh more. Give me reasons to. The moment stretched between them, loaded with possibility. Then Nomi announced, you two are being weird, and it broke. 3 days later, Sorry discovered chocolate. Nate had been saving the bar for a special occasion, real Earth chocolate, not the synthetic stuff. When their first Threx samples showed actual growth, he figured that qualified. Try this, he said, breaking off a square. Sorry bit into it suspiciously. Her eyes widened. Then she grabbed the entire bar and ate it in 3 bites. That's amazing. It tastes like, she swayed slightly, like sunshine feels. You okay? I'm wonderful. She giggled, actually giggled. Everything's wonderful. Your face is wonderful. Did you know your eyes are the color of Threx-contaminated soil? That's not a compliment, Sorry. It absolutely is. Threx soil is the best soil, the most important soil. She started reorganizing his tools again, but this time by perceived happiness level. This wrench looks sad. It goes in the timeout corner. Are you drunk? Don't be ridiculous. Velkhani don't get drunk. We get enhanced. She held up a screwdriver, studying it intently. This one's singing. Chocolate has ethanol analogs, Nomi said from her corner, not looking up. Makes Velkhani silly. Mama used to have a piece on anniversaries and sing old mining songs. I know mining songs, Sorry announced. She began what might generously be called singing in Velkhani. It sounded like someone strangling a beautiful bird. Okay, no more chocolate for you, Nate said, trying to take the wrapper. She clutched it to her chest. You gave it to me. No taking back gifts. That's rude. Humans are so rude. Except you. You're only medium rude. Thanks? You're welcome. She focused on his face with intense concentration. Why is your breathing so loud? Are you dying? I'm breathing normally. No, it's all wrong. Here. She pressed both hands to his chest, fingers spread wide. You're only using the top parts. Breathe deeper. I only have 2 lungs, remember. Then use them better. She demonstrated, her chest expanding in a way that drew his attention places it shouldn't go. See? Efficient. Sorry, you're drunk on chocolate. Enhanced, and you're not breathing right. It's distracting. She stood on her toes, bringing her face close to his, apparently intent on listening to his lungs. Her breath smelled like chocolate and something uniquely her, cinnamon adjacent but sharper. This close, he could see the faint pattern of darker purple that traced her cheekbones like constellations. Your heart's going fast, she observed. That's not normal either. Wonder why? She blinked at him, processing sarcasm through her chocolate haze. Then understanding dawned. Oh, she said softly. Oh, we're having a moment. We're having something. She kissed him. It was awkward and perfect simultaneously. Her lips were cooler than human normal, and she broke away after 2 seconds, gasping. Can't breathe, she explained. Different lungs need different air. We're incompatible for kissing. We'll figure it out. That's your solution to everything. Haven't been wrong yet. She kissed him again, pulling back to breathe, then coming back for more. They found a rhythm. Kiss, breathe, kiss, breathe. Like everything else, it just needed adaptation. "You," Nomi commented from her corner. "Adults are gross." That became their pattern. Early mornings growing threats, Sari organizing things by increasingly arbitrary systems, Nate teaching her human jokes she never quite got, Nomi providing running commentary on their mutual stupidity. "Why did the chicken cross the road?" Nate asked one morning. "Chickens are birds, right? Probably to find better nesting material." "No, it's a joke, to get to the other side." Sari frowned. "But that's obvious. Of course it crossed to get to the other side. That's how crossing works." "That's the joke. Humans have broken humor. Says the woman who sorted my bolts by emotional resonance." That was the chocolate. Mostly. The threats grew. Slowly, uncertainly, but it grew. Pale purple caps pushing up through the substrate, releasing that distinctive smell. Earth and metal and something indefinably alive. "It's working," Sari breathed, staring at the first mature mushroom. "It's actually working. Told you." She grabbed his face and kissed him properly, forgetting about breathing until they both pulled away gasping. "Worth it," she said. They started small. One mushroom to a Velcani family down the street with 3 kids, 2 to the elderly couple whose pension barely covered rent, always at night, always quiet. "This is dangerous," Sari warned, returning from a delivery. "People are talking, asking where the Threx comes from." "Let them ask. Governor Crade owns the monopoly. If he finds out, he won't." But Nomi had started noticing things. "There's a man who watches our building," she told Nate one morning, focused on her drawing. "He has a mean face and his uniform is too tight. Probably just security." "Security for what? We don't have anything worth guarding." She added another tomato to her picture. "He watches when Sari leaves for deliveries." Nate's soldier brain started calculating angles, exits, contingencies. He moved the Threx operation to his old ship that night, the derelict Dream, rusting behind the greenhouse. The climate control still worked, even if nothing else did. Good thing, because Crade's men arrived 2 days later. "Random inspection," the lead guard announced, shoving past Nate into the greenhouse, 4 more spread out, scanners sweeping. "Had reports of illegal cultivation." "I'm growing tomatoes," Nate said, keeping his voice bored. "Since when are tomatoes illegal? Not tomatoes we're looking for." They tore through his careful organization, knocked over seedlings, trampled 3 weeks of work. Sari watched from the doorway, fists clenched white. Nomi hid behind her sister's legs. The scanner passed over the spot where the Threx had been growing. Nothing. "Clear," one guard reported. The leader, Ron, according to his name tag, stepped close to Nate. Close enough to smell the stale coffee and corruption on his breath. "Know what happens to people who disrupt the economic ecosystem? They get commended for innovation?" Ron smiled, all teeth, no warmth. "They disappear, them and anyone they care about." His eyes flicked to Sari and Nomi, threat clear as a knife to the throat. "Good thing I'm just growing tomatoes then." "Yeah, good thing." They left the greenhouse in ruins. Dirt everywhere, equipment smashed, weeks of legitimate work destroyed. Nomi crept out from behind Sari, surveying the damage with 2 adult eyes. "They'll be back," she said quietly. "No, sweetie, they were just—" "They'll be back." She looked at Nate. "Mean faces always come back." That night, Nate found Nomi sitting outside the greenhouse, knees drawn to her chest. The settlement's artificial lights painted purple shadows on her silver hair. "Can't sleep?" She shook her head. He sat beside her, letting the silence stretch until she was ready. "What if they take Sorry?" she whispered finally. "Like they took Mama and Papa?" "Your parents weren't taken, kid. They got sick." "Same thing. Gone is gone." She picked at a loose thread on her sleeve. "If Sorry goes to prison, they won't let me visit. I looked up the rules. No minors allowed." "She's not going to prison." "You don't know that." "I do, actually." He met her violet eyes. "Because humans are stubborn. Ask anyone. We're too stupid to know when we're beaten, so we just keep going. And right now, I've decided you and Sorry are family. Humans don't give up on family." "We're not really family. Different species, remember." "Family's not about species. It's about who shows up." She considered this. "You showed up." "Yeah. Even though we tackled you and ate your garbage and reorganized all your tools wrong, especially because of that." She leaned against his side, small and warm and trusting. "Sorry likes you. She pretends she doesn't, but she hums your human songs when she thinks I'm not listening." "Yeah?" "The one about the chicken. She still doesn't understand why it's funny." "Neither do I, honestly." They sat watching the stars. What few made it through the settlement's dust and light pollution. Somewhere out there was the wreckage of the Velkhani homeworld, consumed by aggressive fungus that turned out to be their salvation's twisted cousin. Somewhere else were the wars Nate had walked away from, still grinding on without him. But here, now, was a kid who needed protecting, and a woman who kissed him between breaths and threats growing in impossible places. "I won't let them take her," he promised. "Okay," Nomi said, and the simple trust in that word was heavier than any mission he'd ever carried. 2 weeks later, it happened. Sorry had been distributing threats to a family near the market when Crade's men surrounded her. The charge was theft, specifically stealing proprietary biological material from the Crade Consortium. "That's impossible," she told Roan as he bound her wrists. "You can't steal what grows wild." "Nothing grows wild on Torin Ka. Everything belongs to someone." They dragged her to the detention center while a crowd watched, too afraid to intervene. Word reached Nate within the hour. He was cleaning his gun when Nomi found him, the one hidden under the false bottom of his tool chest, the one he'd promised himself he'd never need again. "Are you going to save my sister?" she asked in a small voice. He looked at the weapon. 20 years of violence solved with violence. But that was the old way, the easy way. Sorry and Nomi deserved better. "Yeah, kid, but not the way they expect." He set the gun aside and pulled out his tablet instead. Time to remind Governor Crade that humans had more than one way to fight. The revolution would be agricultural. The dust storm hit Torin Ka 3 hours after midnight, right on schedule. Nate stood on the roof of his greenhouse, goggles tight against his face, watching the wall of red approach. In his hands, a modified crop duster, the kind farmers used for pesticide, repurposed for something better. The canister attached to it contained 2 months of work, millions of Threx spores suspended in a nutrient solution that would help them survive the journey. "Wind speed?" he called down to Nomi, who huddled in the doorway with his weather scanner. 47 kilometers per hour, she shouted back. "Getting faster." Perfect. The storm would carry the spores across the entire settlement, into every crack and crevice where moisture collected. By the time it passed, Torin Ka would be seeded with enough Threx to feed every Velkhani for generations. If it worked, if the spores survived, if Crade didn't figure out what he'd done before the mushrooms started growing. Too many ifs. But Sari had been in detention for 18 hours now, and legal channels would take weeks she didn't have. The Velkhani legal system favored whoever could afford better lawyers, and Crade owned most of them. So Nate did what humans did best. He cheated. The storm hit like a physical force, nearly knocking him flat. He triggered the duster, watching the pale purple cloud disappear instantly into the greater maelstrom. In seconds, the spores would be everywhere, carried on winds that reached every corner of the settlement. "Is it done?" Nomi asked when he climbed down, shaking dust from his hair. "It's done." "Will it work?" He looked at the kid, too thin, too serious, too old for 8 years. "Remember what I told you about humans? You're too stubborn to know when you're beaten." "Exactly. So yeah, it'll work." She nodded, absolute faith in her violet eyes. That trust terrified him more than any firefight ever had. The next morning, Nate walked into the detention center's visiting area like he owned it. Confidence was 9/10 of getting past security, and he'd spent decades perfecting the walk of someone who belonged wherever he was. Sari sat behind reinforced plastic, wrists still bound though the marks showed she'd been fighting them. Her left eye had swollen shut, purple skin darker where someone's fist had connected. "Who hit you?" "Hello to you too." Her voice came out rough. "And it doesn't matter." "It does to me." "Nate." She leaned forward as much as the restraints allowed. "You shouldn't be here. They're watching everyone who visits me." "Let them watch." He pulled out his tablet, angling it so the cameras couldn't see. "I need you to look at something." On the screen, his calculations for spore dispersal, weather patterns, growth projections. Her good eye widened as she understood. "You did? That's insane. The entire settlement. Why think small? Crade will wake up in 2 weeks to find his monopoly worthless. Hard to control something that grows in every abandoned building and drainage pipe." Despite everything, she smiled, bruised and exhausted and still beautiful. "You weaponized mushrooms. I weaponized hope. You taught me that. I taught you that purple wrenches are lucky." "That too." A guard approached. "Time's up." "Already told you," Nate said to Sari as he stood. "Humans don't give up on family." The spores took 8 days to germinate. The first reports came from the industrial district, purple caps pushing through cracks in abandoned warehouses. Then the residential zones, threx sprouting from damp corners and basement walls. By day 10, children were harvesting mushrooms from their own backyards. Nate watched from his greenhouse as the first Velkani family cooked threx they'd picked themselves. The parents cried. The kids just ate, finally able to fill their stomachs without counting every bite. "It's everywhere," Nomi reported, bouncing on her toes. "Jeka from school found some growing under his stairs, and Mira's grandmother has a whole patch behind her water collector." "Good. You did it? You made the mushrooms free." Not free, Nate thought. Not yet. Crade still held Sari, and men like him didn't accept defeat gracefully. The governor arrived at sunset on day 12, as Nate expected. But not alone. Crade brought 20 guards, all armed, plus a wheeled demolition unit that could reduce the greenhouse to rubble in minutes. What he hadn't expected was the crowd. Word had spread somehow. Velkani families stood between Crade's forces and the greenhouse, not threatening, just present. Parents holding children who'd finally stopped crying from hunger. Elderly Velkani who'd been rationing their medication money for food, all standing silent witness. "Move," Crade ordered. Nobody moved. "I said move!" His face had gone red under the dust. "This human is a terrorist. He's destroyed our economic infrastructure." "He fed our children," an old woman said quietly. "He contaminated the entire settlement with unregulated biological matter." "He gave us food that grows free," a father countered, his daughter on his shoulders. Crade pushed through the crowd, Ron and 3 guards clearing a path. He found Nate standing in the greenhouse doorway, Nomi beside him. "You think you've won?" Crade's voice came out low, dangerous. "I own the judges, the police. Your friend rots in detention until I say otherwise." "Actually," a familiar voice said, "she doesn't." Sari walked through the crowd, free and unbound. though the bruise on her face had darkened to deep purple. Behind her, a woman in advocate's robes that Nate recognized, Kira Volta, the Velcani rights lawyer who usually couldn't afford lunch, much less bail. How? Funny thing about economic crashes, Kira said, pulling out a tablet. When Threx becomes worthless, so do Threx-based bribes. Your judges suddenly remembered what law looks like without payment attached. Also, Sari added, turns out imprisoning someone for distributing freely growing fungi isn't actually illegal. Who knew? Crade's hand moved to his sidearm. 20 guards tensed. The crowd pressed closer. You could shoot me, Nate said conversationally. But look around. You kill the human who fed their kids and these people will remember. You'll need to sleep sometime. Is that a threat? It's math. You've got 20 guards. There are 3,000 Velcani in this district alone. I don't like your odds. For a moment, violence hung in the air like another dust storm approaching. Then Nomi stepped forward, all 4 feet of 8-year-old determination. You're mean, she told Crade, and your face is too red. My mama said people with red faces have bad hearts. Maybe you should eat more vegetables. Someone in the crowd laughed. Then another. Soon the whole street echoed with it, not cruel laughter, but the kind that came from tension breaking, from realizing the Emperor had no clothes and a child had pointed it out. Crade holstered his weapon, jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. This isn't over, Hawkins. Yeah, it is. Nate pulled his old dog tags from his pocket, the ones that marked him as someone who'd fought in wars nobody won. I spent 20 years in conflicts that didn't end. This one does. Today, walk away. Crade looked at the crowd, at Sari standing beside Nate, at Nomi still glaring at him with the fearlessness of a child who'd already lost everything once. Governor, Ron said quietly, we should go. They left. No dramatic exit, no final threats. Just 21 people walking away from a fight they'd already lost the moment those spores hit the wind. The crowd dispersed slowly, people stopping to thank Nate, to touch his shoulder, to press small gifts into his hands. A carved stone, a piece of cloth, a child's drawing of purple mushrooms. Velcani gratitude expressed in objects rather than words. So, Sari said when they were finally alone, you started a revolution. Agricultural reform, totally different. You're ridiculous. You love it. I love, she stopped, color rising in her cheeks. Yeah, he said, me too. They kissed, remembering to breathe, while Nomi made exaggerated gagging sounds in the background. 1 year later, the sign read, Hawkins Family Farm, all species welcome, in 3 languages. Though the Velcani translation apparently included a pun about mushrooms that Nate still didn't understand. He stood at the edge of what had been a wasteland, now transformed. Rows of earth vegetables grew alongside patches of Threx, purple and green under Torin Ka's orange sky. The greenhouse had expanded 3 times, with 2 new buildings under construction. The tomatoes are singing. Nomi raced past, healthy and strong, silver hair flying. She'd tied bells to the tomato stakes, making music with every breeze. 9 years old now, still too serious sometimes, but learning how to be a kid. Tomatoes don't sing, Kilo called out, another Velcani child who'd started coming around to learn farming. These ones do. Listen. A dozen children now spent afternoons at the farm, learning to grow things. Their parents paid what they could, sometimes credits, sometimes labor, sometimes just gratitude. It was enough. You're thinking too loud, Sari said, coming up beside him. Dirt smudged her cheek and her hands were stained purple from harvesting Threx. Beautiful. Thinking about how a year ago I just wanted to grow tomatoes in peace. And now? Now I've got a dozen kids who insist vegetables have feelings, a partner who organizes my tools by their emotional resonance, and mushrooms growing in every corner of the settlement. Sounds terrible. The worst. She leaned into his side, warm and solid and real. They'd figured out the breathing thing mostly. The kissing still required coordination, but they'd gotten good at taking turns. The other stuff had required more creativity, but humans were nothing if not adaptable. "Nate," Nomi called from where she was teaching the younger kids about soil pH. "Tell them about the time you made it rain spores." That's not what happened. "It's better her way," Sari murmured. "Let her have the story." So he did, telling the tale with appropriate drama while the kids listened wide-eyed. How the human farmer defeated the evil governor with nothing but mushrooms and stubbornness. How love conquered hunger and family meant more than species. Mostly true, even if the details got rearranged. Later, as the sun set and the kids went home, Nate found his old dog tags hanging on the post by the original Threx patch, the first one they'd grown together. Below it, Nomi had drawn another picture. 3 figures holding hands under a sky full of stars. The tall human with dirty hands, the Velkani woman with purple tools, and the little girl with silver hair and a bag full of mushrooms. The words beneath, in handwriting that was getting better, "My family." "You know what the best thing I ever grew was?" Nate asked, pulling Sari close. "The Threx that saved my people?" "No." He looked at the farm, their farm, at Nomi trying to convince a tomato plant to dance, at the greenhouse full of impossible things growing where they shouldn't. "This family. That's cheesy, even for you. You love it. I love you. Now, who's cheesy?" They kissed, breathing in turns while Nomi yelled, "Ew! Grown-ups are gross! Get a greenhouse!" "We have a greenhouse," Nate called back. "Then use it for being gross where I can't see." Sari laughed against his mouth, and that sound, joy without reservation, was worth every risk he'd taken. Every spore released into the wind, every moment of doubt. The farm spread before them in the dying light. Rows of earth plants and alien mushrooms growing side by side. Children's footprints in the irrigation channels. Bells singing on tomato stakes. A whole community fed because one human was too stubborn to accept the way things were. "Hey," Sari said. "Thank you." "For what?" "For staying. When your ship got fixed 6 months ago, you could have left." He had fixed the navigation system, true. The derelict dream could fly again if he wanted. But why would he leave? Everything he'd been looking for was here, in dirty hands and purple mushrooms and a kid who insisted vegetables had feelings. "Nowhere else to go," he said. Liar. "Yeah." Stars emerged in the darkening sky. Somewhere among them was Earth, where he'd been born. The Velkani homeworld, dead and gone. All the places he'd fought and bled and lost pieces of himself. But home was here, in a greenhouse on a dusty mining planet with a woman who sorted tools by color and a kid who made tomatoes sing. "Sorry, Nate," Nomi called from inside. "Dinner's ready. I made soup." "Please tell me you didn't use the experimental fertilizer again," Sari called back. "Only a little." They headed inside toward warmth and light and whatever potentially toxic soup a 9-year-old had created. Behind them, Threx grew wild in the gathering darkness, free and abundant, a revolution planted in spores and stubbornness. On the post by the door, those old dog tags caught the last of the light, not a monument to what he'd been, but a marker of what he'd become. A soldier turned farmer, a killer turned cultivator, a lonely human who'd found a family in the most unlikely place. The bells on the tomato plants chimed in the evening breeze, and if you listened just right, maybe they really were singing. 5 years later, Nomi's personal log, age 14. "Okay, so this is recording, right? Good. Hi, future me or whoever finds this. Nomi Hawkins Talon here, and yes, that's a mouthful, but Nate insisted on the hyphen thing when he officially adopted me. Something about honoring both families, which is sweet but makes filling out forms a nightmare. Where do I even start? I always wanted a little sister, someone to braid hair with, teach about which mushrooms won't kill you, maybe share clothes when we got older. Instead, I got Kip and Thomas, my two half-human, half-Velcani brothers who are basically tiny purple tornadoes with Nate's stubbornness and Sari's inability to sit still. They're 4 and 2, and they've already destroyed 3 greenhouses. Not on purpose. Well, mostly not on purpose. Turns out hybrid kids have some interesting biological quirks. Like Kip can hold his breath for 30 minutes, 3 lungs, he got the best of both species, and thinks it's hilarious to hide underwater in the irrigation tanks. Thomas somehow inherited what Nate calls human chaos energy, but multiplied by 10. Yesterday he organized all the tomatoes by size, not picked them, organized them while they were still on the vine, with labels. But I love those little monsters. Even when Kip puts Threx spores in my bed as a joke, or Thomas realphabetizes my homework by emotional relevance, definitely Sari's fault. The farm? Oh man, the farm is insane now. Remember that tiny greenhouse where I used to do homework? It's now a complex of 47 buildings. We ship tomatoes to 3-star systems. 3-star systems. Turns out Earth vegetables are like alien crack. Everyone wants them, but nobody else can grow them like Nate. We're stupid rich. Like credits falling out of our pockets rich. Sari keeps trying to give it away to Velcani refugee organizations, and Nate keeps building new greenhouses, and somehow we still have more money than we know what to do with. Last week, a food critic from the inner worlds called our tomatoes transcendent, and now we have a 3-month waiting list. Oh, and we have 3 Space Michelin stars. I don't even know what that means, but Nate got drunk on chocolate. Yes, it affects humans too, just differently, and cried when the notification came through. We're fancy farmers, he kept saying. Fancy farmers. Sari had to put him to bed while he mumbled about how his old squad would never believe this. But here's the thing, and why I'm recording this now, today, before anyone finds out what I've done. So you know how I've been working on modified Threx strains? Just basic stuff, increasing yield, making them more resistant to temperature changes. Normal boring science that makes Nate proud and keeps me out of trouble. Except, I maybe went a little further than that. There's this old Velcani legend about warrior mushrooms, Threx variants that grew on ancient battlefields and gave soldiers impossible strength. Everyone thinks it's mythology. Stories to tell kids about the glory days before the homeworld died. But I found spores. In the original samples Sari bought 5 years ago, dormant and hidden among the regular Threx. And because I'm apparently Nate's daughter in all the ways that matter, I thought, hey, why not grow these and see what happens? What happens is they work. I ate one an hour ago, just a tiny piece, smaller than my pinky nail. And about 10 minutes ago, I accidentally punched through the reinforced wall of Greenhouse 7, like straight through. 2 feet of concrete and my hand went through it like paper. I'm standing here looking at this hole, at my completely unhurt purple fist, and thinking maybe I should have told someone about this experiment. But also, holy shit, I'm basically a superhero now. The effects are wearing off already. I can feel my normal strength returning. But for about 15 minutes there, I could have probably lifted a shuttle. A small shuttle, but still. I need to tell Nate and Sari. They're going to kill me. Well, Sari's going to give me the disappointed face that's worse than yelling, and Nate's going to do that thing where he's secretly proud but has to pretend to be responsible. But imagine if we could refine this, make it safe, consistent. The Velcani were forced off their homeworld because they were physically weaker than other species, couldn't compete for resources. But what if they didn't have to be? Oh crap, I hear Kip coming. He's singing that stupid tomato song Nate taught him. I need to hide this hole before... Nomi! Why is there a hole in Greenhouse 7? Damn it. Kid's got Nate's tactical awareness and Sari's inability to mind his own business. Okay, I gotta go do damage control. If you're listening to this in the future and I'm either grounded forever or accidentally became some kind of mushroom-powered superhero, just remember, this all started because a hungry kid ate garbage and a bitter soldier decided to grow hope instead. Pretty good origin story, if you ask me. Oh, and if my brothers find my stash of warrior mushrooms, do not let them eat any. Tomas with super strength would literally end the world. Nomi out. End recording. Sound of crashing, a child's laughter, and Nomi yelling, "Kip, don't touch that."